Welcome back. Pace Immigration, paceimmigration.com, talking about the E-2 and L-1 visas today to live and work in the United States. And to talk to us about it, once again, immigration lawyer Andy Semichuk. Andy, how's it going?
It's fantastic. Nice to see you, Sean. Let's get going on this.
All right. Nice to see you too. We're going to start off with the E-2 visa requirements. This is how an investor can live and work in the United States by running their own business. Andy, go through these points with us.
Sure. Okay. So someone wants to buy a hotel in the United States, for example. First question to get this visa. First question is, are you a national of a treaty country? Meaning, did the United States sign a treaty with your country to enable you to get an E-2 visa? Canada is one such a country, Mexico the other, because of the NAFTA, so-called USMCA treaty. Other countries, of course, traditionally, that like Great Britain, the Commonwealth, and so on, usually France, etc., they have treaties with the United States, and you can get the E-2 visa through them. Second is, you have to invest a substantial and sufficient amount to make the company or the investment successful. So depending on what the business is, you have to invest enough money to make a go of it. The third thing is it has to be a real investment, a real enterprise, not a pretend business. Those are some of the key points in terms of investing.
Okay, so we're not talking about, it sounds like they're trying to make sure that people understand this is not a citizenship by investment program you might find in some other places where you just show up with $1 million and boom, you've got residency or a path to a green card.
No, this is a work permit. It's for 5 years. Your spouse also gets a work permit, as do your children. The visa and is entitled to work, and the children can go to school, to university or college or whatever it is, using this visa at a discounted tuition rate.
All right, we'll skip on over to the next slide, which is more about the investments. We dig down into this, a lot of language here, but let's talk about this. Investment cannot be marginal. What does that mean?
Okay, so you can't buy a hotel for $1 and expect to get an E-2 visa. The investment has to be significant relative to the overall cost of the business you're trying to get into. That's basically the marginal aspect.
Okay, and then I see it has to also be at risk. In other words, you can't just dump it in a bank. You actually have to put some skin in the game, as it were.
Yes, that's exactly right. This is not one of these, I'll put some money in the bank and get the work visa and then goodbye, Charlie. No, you have to be involved in the business. You have to put the money into the business.
All right. And that last point there, to develop and direct the business, it sounds pretty hands-on.
It is, but relatively speaking, it's pretty flexible in the sense that you can travel back and forth to your country. For example, Canadian going back and forth. But you have to attend once in a while and make sure the business is running. You know, how's the business going? Be in meetings and stuff like that. There's a fine line, but the idea is that you need to be involved in some way.
Okay. And carrying on to our next slide of the E-2 visa requirement. It sounds like there's quite a lot of paperwork with the E-2, or should we be this frightened about all the paperwork? How long does this take?
Well, to get the visa at the moment depends on where you're applying from. There is a lineup, so it will take some time for you to get the visa. For example, Canada, it might take a year to get the visa, the work visa. But the work visa is for 5 years and renewable in 5-year increments for as long as you've got the business.
Okay.
So there's that challenge. But nonetheless, people are still applying. And, there's a lineup because of the pandemic, basically.
Okay. I see we've got some points here. There's an interview, which sounds appropriate. You've got the visa wait times here. Also, the digital fingerprint scan. I guess there's some security considerations.
Yeah. Biometrics, they'll do the digital fingerprint and also an eye picture. But that's nothing. It's peanuts. It's just like what they do at the airport when you're going through.
Right. What's been your experience with the E-2? People have had success?
Very successful. It's the key visa, as far as I'm concerned, in the United States for business investors.
Sounds good. So we've got the L-1 visa, which is called an Intra-Corporate Transferee visa. Andy, take us through it.
Okay, so think Toyota, an executive, a manager in Tokyo wants to transfer over to New York to run the Toyota plant in the United States. That's a typical intra-corporate transferee L-1 visa. It's a work visa to enable that person, an executive or a senior manager, or someone who's a technical person, to go to the United States and work.
All right. And I notice here we've got executive and senior managers, functional managers, and then specialized knowledge workers. It sounds to me like they're trying to make sure people aren't going to. How many people apply and say, well, I'm a senior manager? Who gets to say if they are or not?
Well, that's a fine art. And you can't send in 1,000, senior managers. A senior manager is someone who has managers that he's managing who have employees that those managers are managing. That's a senior manager. An executive is someone who makes major policy decisions, such as let's build a plant in the United States, as opposed to how many, pens or pencils we got to buy tomorrow.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And I noticed we've also pointed out here transferring to a parent, subsidiary, branch, or an affiliate of the enterprise. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be the head plant, does it? It can be any satellite office, as it were.
Any affiliated, even a satellite office will work. There's just got to be an affiliation between the foreign company and the American company.
Okay. The L1 intra-corporate transferee, the process. I've talked to you about this before. It's pretty straightforward, isn't it?
It is. And in the case of Canada, for example, you can get this visa right at the border. You apply just with a pile of papers, and they'll give you the visa right at the border. And it's good for up to 7 years. Like initially, if it's a startup, it's only a 1-year startup visa, and then you have to renew it. But you can get it renewed for up to 7 years. So it's pretty good. And, in the case of someone who's overseas, they would have to apply through the U.S. Regional Center, one of the regional centers in the U.S., get an approval, then go to the consulate, get an approval, and then go to the border and apply to enter the United States. So there's a real expedited processing route that you can take if you're coming in from the United States or from Canada or Mexico to go into the United States. That's one advantage of NAFTA, USMCA.
Obviously, this starts with the company, as it were. I mean, you can advise people, hey, check with your boss if they'd like you to transfer there, because you can't maybe get that going yourself. But once they give the affirmative, that's where you might step in?
Yes, that's right. It's a matter of agreeing that the person has to be transferred from the foreign company into the United States to work as a manager or executive inside the United States, or a techie. And the key thing is the person has to have worked outside the United States for the affiliated company for at least 1 year before entering the United States. That's
okay. So they can't hire you tomorrow and then send you out next Tuesday.
Correct. Now, this slide that you've got here, it's talking about what, let's say, someone from Tokyo or some other country is going to do in order to get into the United States. They have to sign the agreement with a lawyer. Usually they use a lawyer to get in. They have to apply to the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service, get an approval. Then they have to go to the consulate and get an approval there. That's where this DS-160, it's a form that you file, is involved. Then you have to go to the airport on entry and get approval. And then you can apply for a green card if you're in an L1 status for a year inside the United States.
Still, it's pretty good. I mean, path to a green card, that's big.
It is. It's the best path to the green card from the investor point of view.
Comparing the two of them, people can go over this on their own time if they want. But your experience has been that these are two of the best work visas going.
Correct. And just to highlight a few points, notice that the L1 is limited in duration, usually 1 or 3 years, whereas the E2 is 5. The amount of time the L1 has to attend the business is substantially longer. You have to be actively involved, more actively involved. So the E2 is more flexible. Notice that there's no investment treaty involved with the L1. You can come from anywhere in the world on an L1 visa to the United States. Very important if you're from some country off in the distance and you want to get into the United States.
Excellent.
things like that. I'm not going to touch on everything here. Of course, you have to speak English in either one. And there's no previous management requirement in the E-2 case, but you have to be in some way competent to run your business, even remotely, in order to get the E-2.
Right.
And there's an investment involved in the E-2 case.
Excellent. Two great options. You can contact Andy Semichuk at pacelawfirm.com. You can also reach him on Twitter at @Semichuk and read his column in Forbes. Good stuff all the time. Thanks again, Andy.